Again, thank you for being here, and thanks to my colleagues for being here. I know a couple others are planning to join. This is a very important issue, particularly, in light of what is going on this week. We had the President and members of the House leadership meeting about infrastructure. Everybody's looking for more money for infrastructure, right? And infrastructure is what really this hearing is about. It's about permitting of infrastructure broadly defined. It's about construction projects that play a critical role in all of our day-to-day lives. It's about ports and waterways we use for international commerce. It's about water resource projects to stop flooding from storm surges. It's about energy construction to be sure we have the power we need, from solar power plants we'll hear about today to pipelines to nuclear power plant construction. It's about coastal restoration that supports the environment. It's also about broadband internet throughout the country, which allows Americans to advance their education and rise in the workforce. It's about ensuring we can move forward with these projects in sensible ways. Delays and lack of investment in these infrastructure and construction projects have a number of damaging consequences. First, it means fewer jobs, and we'll hear from Mr. Knisely and others about that today. It means a weaker economy, reduced standing in the world. It means we're not making progress on major projects, and capital is going elsewhere, including to other countries. It's hurting our economy and our ability to create good-paying jobs. One of the reasons we're having so much trouble is this outdated process we have for granting permits for large projects, construction projects, infrastructure projects. Again, everyone's desperate to find dollars for infrastructure right now, right? And this is a way, frankly, for us to ensure that we are smarter in stretching the dollars we have further by not having those dollars be wasted on the delays, and the dollars will stay here in this country. Right now, the World Bank ranks the United States 26th in the world for dealing with construction permits, for being able to greenlight a project, 26th in the world. That puts us behind Lithuania and Tonga. It's also better than it used to be. We were 39th in the world when FAST-41, the legislation we're talking about today, was implemented, and so we've made some progress. Similarly, there's a 2017 infrastructure report card, the most recent one from the American Society of Civil Engineers. They give the United States a cumulative GPA of D+, ranging from B for rail to D for roads. One reason we're so behind is, again, it takes so long and it's so costly to be able to permit a project here in the United States. We can do better than this. The rest of the world is doing better, other developed countries and many of the developing countries. And again, otherwise capital goes elsewhere. Let me be clear, we can fix this permitting process without changing the underlying environmental and safety standards, and that's one thing we'll talk about today. Protecting the environment and protecting people who use our infrastructure is critical, but we need strong standards. The process that we use to meet those standards has simply become too complicated and outdated. I first got involved in this about 10 years ago when American Municipal Power, some of you know that group, came to me. AMP was working on a hydropower project on the Ohio River. They told me the agencies reviewing their permit application weren't talking to each other, and they told me as soon as they finished one permit, there was another permit that came up, seriatim, rather than having anyone be accountable. They said there were mistakes, delays, redundancy. It took them 10 years to get the permit to put a small hydropower plant on the Ohio River. And frankly, I think they wish they'd never even started on this project because it just became too costly. Capital's not that patient. 10 years is just too long. And no one wants to invest in a project that's not going to be ready for at least a decade. So I reached out to colleagues, including Senator McCaskill from Missouri. We did what legislators are supposed to do. We worked on a bipartisan basis with a whole array of stakeholders to put together a new process for permitting. We worked with environmental groups like NRDC, business groups like the National Association of Manufacturers, labor groups like the AFL-CIO, Building Trades Council, and we introduced this bipartisan bill as part of this effort called the Federal Permitting Improvement Act. It now is part of the highway bill, so it became part of the FAST bill, therefore FAST-41, which is the Section 41 of FAST. Large projects apply to get help from the Council in navigating permitting process. The agency involved in that project has a designated lead agency, so a project sponsor can have a single point of contact, and so one agency is accountable. Very important to have accountability, we learned. The agencies are responsible for coming up with a coordinated project plan that they submit to this Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council we'll hear from today. The plan sets out each permit, all the studies needed, and the timeline for completion. And then as the process moves along, the Council's Executive Director, who's with us here today, resolves conflicts that might arise between the agencies. By the way, the law also gives additional accountability another way. It gives the public more accountability because it requires that agencies post the project's plan on an online permitting dashboard so the public can see, so the transparency is there, how that permitting process is going. And by the way, FAST-41 doesn't guarantee a project's going to get approved. It may or may not get approved. It just helps them get the project moving along. It gives them an answer, one way or the other. It also reduces the statute of limitations for lawsuits. The NEPA statute of limitations for most projects is 6 years. That means for 6 years after permits are granted, many projects really don't get started because they're waiting because of these lawsuits that might pop up. For covered projects under this bill, it's a 2-year statute of limitations. That was a compromise. We had initially asked for 150 days and then 180 days, but some groups wanted to be sure it was 2 years. That's still a lot longer than the 150 days for traditional transportation projects. Both the FAST-41 2-year limitation and the MAP 21 150-day statute of limitations were carefully crafted bipartisan agreements signed into law in the Obama administration. So during the Obama administration, we limited certain transportation projects under our transportation bill in a bipartisan way to 150 days, and ours is 2 years. And finally, good news, FAST-41 is working. Over the past few years, the Council has saved projects more than $1 billion and avoided delays. There are now 40 major projects on the permitting dashboard, and new sponsors are interested in participating and applying to do so. The Council has helped electricity transmission and pipeline projects, as well as several major environmental restoration projects, renewable energy projects. For instance, today we're going to hear from Laura Abram from First Solar about how the Council assisted the Desert Quartzsite project move forward with a 450-megawatt solar power development in California. I'm also looking forward to hearing from Mike Nisley, the Executive Secretary and Treasurer of the Ohio Building Trades. The union has been incredibly supportive of FAST-41. We're grateful for your support, Michael. Also like to say that after a few years of delays, FAST-41 is now going full steam ahead. We had difficulty in getting an executive director in place. We now have one, and Alex Hergott. We'll hear from Alex today. I'm really glad he's there. After a 21-month gap in an appointed executive director, it's good to have an enthusiastic and energetic leader in that job. We'll hear from him today again. We wanted to make sure it would work, so we put a 7-year sunset on the legislation. Now that it is working, Senator McCaskill and I introduced a bill last Congress to remove that sunset and give the Council Executive Director the ability to give advice to other projects when asked. It would also set a 2-year goal for agencies to finish the permitting process for these projects. 2 years. It's not a hard and fast deadline. Sometimes projects are going to take longer. It's a goal. But setting that goal will help inject additional accountability, common sense accountability into this process. Even with its slow start again, after just 3 years, FAST-41 is now yielding real results. These results mean certainty for project sponsors, which means more certainty for investors and more certainty for projects that they're actually going to get built. It means more jobs for the people who build these projects. It means better roads, ports, energy transmission, all of which spur more economic growth. It means being able to move forward faster with much-needed environmental restoration projects like the coastal restoration projects in Louisiana, the renewable energy projects we talked about earlier. Finally, again, it enables us to stretch that dollar further to be able to do more in terms of infrastructure. So thank you all for being here today. Again, I'm looking forward to hearing from the witnesses how they're improving the process and what we can do better going forward. And I would ask Senator Carper for his comments.